But you brought up the Big 12. Let's get into it. This is a conference that, I'm going to go based off of your question. Big 10 or Big 12. Right now, the only shot that the Big 12 has of making the college football playoff is if Oklahoma goes undefeated in their conference. Because I think that's going to be interesting if it happens, because you look at either Louisville or Clemson. Those are the top two teams of the ACC. That's why I'm throwing those out. If Clemson wins out, they have one conference loss. Louisville already has one conference loss. They're done with conference play. And then you look at the Big Ten. Big Ten's going to have a team with a conference loss, maybe even two conference losses if a Wisconsin wins out. Then you look at the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is interesting because Washington State right now, they don't have a conference loss. We got to see what happens with them. But odds are Washington will beat Washington State and we'll have a team with a one loss in the conference section. That means the only two teams, because Alabama's not going to lose, I'm sorry, there's going to be two teams with undefeated conference records. That, I think, might play into it. If you're looking a Big 10, Big 12, I'll ask you, Brandon, does that matter to you? This team went undefeated in their conference. This team did not.
Again, it's not up to us. It's not up to us whether that's important or not. And I think that look at how it's played out so far. Okay. So in the first week where the top four, every team was released, the top 25, but the top four teams were released of who would be the teams at the season ended then 2 weeks ago, who were going to be the four playoff teams. And they went Alabama, they went Clemson, they went Michigan, and they went all those first three teams undefeated.
Yep.
The fourth one, they went A&M, Texas A&M, who had a loss.
Mm-hmm.
They did not go with Washington, the other undefeated team that had been playing well.
Who was undefeated.
They do not go Washington. A&M then loses again, gives them 2 losses. So then last week's rankings come out. The top 4 teams: Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, and we'll throw Washington in now. They don't put Washington in the week before. They put them in after and say, oh, sorry, we probably should have done this last week.
Mm-hmm.
But you just don't know where their mind is. You don't know where their mind is. And that would have put 2 teams from the same conference in Alabama, Texas A&M, if the season had ended 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Ricky, I cannot tell you. I don't know. I would think that the team that has no losses within their conference and wins their conference is the team that's going to have more weight and hold more water than the team that has one loss in your conference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's going to hold enough water with this committee. You never know. But I do think that if Oklahoma wins these last 2 games against West Virginia and Oklahoma State, which I don't think they will. They'll beat West Virginia, but I don't know if they'll get past Oklahoma State. But if they do, I would sit here on this show and say Oklahoma deserves to be in the college football playoff. When weeks ago, you could go back and find me saying the Big 12 is crap. I say that probably every week. And that Oklahoma will not find themselves there, and they should not. Well, those tides are turning. Oklahoma, if they can win out, I think they deserve a spot there.
If I am the Big 12 conference, like in general, like the commissioners and stuff, I know you're not supposed to root for a team when you're supposed to be in the middle, but I'm rooting for Oklahoma if I am a supporter of the Big 12, because you want to see your conference in the playoff. And the only way you're going to see your conference in that playoff is if Oklahoma wins out. If Oklahoma loses one game, they're not going to be in. And it's all going to be because of what I said in the Big Ten segment. It's all going to come down to conference championships. And if Oklahoma loses one game one game, they're in a three-way tie. They're in a three-way tie with Oklahoma and West Virginia. They won't be on top because one of those teams would have beaten them and would have had the tiebreaker over them. So if I'm rooting for the Big 12, you've got to say, hey, you know what? I am rooting for Oklahoma to win out. The main thing that will be interesting with the committee looking forward, let's say at the end of the year, and I'm just looking Big 10, Big 12, because that's what you mentioned earlier. Let's say for the sake of argument, Michigan wins out and Michigan gets in. They win their last two. They win against Wisconsin in the Big 10 title game. They're the conference champion. Let's say Oklahoma wins out. They're a conference champion. What will be interesting is if, let's say, the committee looks at their schedules and goes, okay, Michigan, your ranked opponents, you beat a number 8 Wisconsin team by 7 points, 14-7, and then you beat an Ohio State team. Now they would have to beat Wisconsin again, so it would be 3 ranked teams that they would have beaten. However, all of those teams, top 10 teams. Because let's be honest, Wisconsin, if they get to the Big Ten title game, they're going to be a top 10 team. Ohio State, probably going to be a top 4 team by the time Michigan plays them in that last week. However, Oklahoma, yeah, you lose the number 3 Ohio State. Yeah, you lose number 15 Houston. But 21 TCU, you beat them. 16 West Virginia, you beat them. Oklahoma State, 13, you beat them. Yes, it's a lower number, but I wonder if they would say you beat more ranked teams and you beat them more convincingly, so we're going to put you in. Well,
let me ask you this. Is Oklahoma's ranking right now, are they too low to be able to come back? They're at 11. They need to try and jump to 4. They need to try and jump 7 spots in just a couple weeks. Can they do that?
See, that's the interesting question because it all goes back to the broken record of what I keep saying of conference championships are going to mean everything. Right now, with no conference championships on the table, fuck no, they're not going to be able to get that high. I mean, you've got, just looking from last week, even with losses, Clemson, Michigan, and Wisconsin are ahead of you. With Alabama, that makes 4 teams. I'd put Ohio State ahead of them, Louisville ahead of them, Wisconsin ahead of them. That means you could get to maybe 8, and that's me not even putting Penn State ahead of you. The thing that's going to propel this Oklahoma team to maybe a top 4 is a conference championship. And that's what needs to happen. However, if I'm an Oklahoma fan, I am also, like, on top of your Sooner red that you guys have, I'm going out and I'm buying a Washington State Cougar shirt, and I'm rooting for them. Because if they can go undefeated, win their side of the Pac-12, make sure Washington not only has 2 losses, but doesn't even get a share of that Pac-12 title, then that can help them even more. So I think that with the Big 12, kind of to answer the overall question that we have and to answer yours, the shot is alive, like Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance, but there's still some more dominoes that need to fall into place. Last weekend helped, but there are still a little bit more dominoes that need to tip over before we can say Big 12 playoff hopes officially alive.
Well, to be honest, there's a lot of dominoes to fall for a lot of people. I mean, there's dominoes to fall for Penn State to be able to make it. There's dominoes to fall for Ohio State to try and be able to make it.
Louisville.
I mean, there are a lot of things in play right now from a week ago where it was well, if this happened or if this happened, then maybe. But now it's like, oh my gosh. Okay, well, if this happened and this happened, then that could be good for this one. And if this happened and this happened, this person's in and that person's in. If this, all of a sudden, we have college football like everyone loves it.
College football needed this to happen.
Yeah.
They needed this. And the one thing I'm going to do before we move in, because I have a question, but I want to save it for the next segment that we have. Before we move on, is there anything from the Big 12 that you think we didn't hit? I'm going to say that.
Yes, every other team.
Every other team. Well, I mean, really, it's Oklahoma or bust for the Big 12.
My question for you, Big 12 has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Texas, Charlie Strong, gone at the end of the year.
No, he's going to stay. I hope he stays.
Okay.
I mean, he's won some games. He's been in some games, almost beat West Virginia this week. don't get rid of him. Let him have one more year. I like Charlie Strong. I think he can do a good job, especially let him build off of the young quarterback moving forward. But you guys know the drill. This is where you guys let us know down below what you guys are thinking about the Big 12, about anything we talked about in this segment of the podcast. But